But this is an AKA who's more honest. This is an AKA who's contemplating things and looking up at the sky and talking about God in a way where he was openly pursuing a path via Christianity. I mean, roping in Booga Love is a big deal. But he talks about it in ways that are intimate. This is not a gimmick. This really feels like a Kanye-esque journey into faith. It really feels like AKA probably would have given us a gospel album after this. He probably would have worked with Joya Celebration and Benjamin Dube, knowing him. He probably would have remixed. He would have talked about Wendy Mseleko and Family Factory. He probably would have sampled Lundi or Rebecca Malop. VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. You were still watching The Headspace, Africa's most poignant hip-hop podcast. It's another review, different setting though. We're at the Wax Spot for a review, I guess. Sometimes it bees like that. Or maybe it's fitting because today I'm reviewing a project from practically, arguably, now especially, Africa's greatest rapper ever. Let's have a moment of silence for Kiernan Forbes, who recently passed away and left echoes of impact that have resonated throughout the whole continent with an album that many have been feasting over, and the trolls and the internet wannabe reviewers have been picking apart just a day into its drop. And I want to say something just about that. I want to talk about the culture of how we consume music and how that's tied into the way we use that to garner attention in the internet. First and foremost, these reviews are critical theory. What I do is something I see as a moment to translate artifacts of culture to different kinds of audiences. So my role as Viwe Joka is to give an album that doesn't necessarily seek to attain to everybody's ear the ability to be understood by everybody's ear. So the one thing, or at least the three things that I've always made sure I do with each and every review, and you can kind of call these my personal principles of critical theory, because that's what you're doing when you're reviewing any work of art. You have ideas on what it means and ultimately if it attained what it intended to do, or if it had any intentions to begin with. But you're kind of looking at how an artwork competes in the marketplace, but also you're looking at the identity of what the artist is actually driven by, inspired by, and the historical footprint of what inculcates the growth and the evolution of their art. So tying that into the way that I approach critical theory, number one, you have to understand the historical journey of the artist. You have to go back, or you at least have to give yourself the time to go back to where this artist comes from. Because here's the thing, folks, as much as we want to, we can't hijack artists to produce art solely for our pleasure. I know capitalism makes us feel like that. We even did an episode, which I'll put a link in the description to, about how capitalism and consumer culture has given audiences this delusion that we literally have the ability to make artists kind of subject their own personal inclinations to give us music we prefer. That's literally impossible. We're all in different places in life, and the only thing an artist, whether that artist is inspired by mass production or they're like in a little obscure avant-garde corner, the only thing they're really entitled to do is speak to their own experiences first. So one thing you've got to understand is the artist's history, because if you don't know where the artist has come from, you're not going to catch where they eventually subsequently are. And this is the first thing I think a lot of people who are particularly outside of the legacy fail to understand about Mass Country as an album. First and foremost, you have to have had followed, aka from literally his mixtape takeza kankumbuza
7 days a week and
Yeah, I keep
365.
forgetting
Yeah,
the
but
number.
it's numbers.
Yeah,
But he landed okay, 7 days a week, 365.
Yeah, from that to Alter Ego, into the magnum opus, what many regard as the classic, greatest AKA album of all time, Levels, going into Touch My Blood, going into Popamania, and then subsequently this. Because if you don't understand what he was trying to do in all those different places, you don't get to see the next move. So before I get into where he was with Mass Country, I think it's important for you, the audience, to understand that you have your opinion, and your opinion is based on whatever listening kind of palette it cultivates you. But you have no right to expect an artist, even your favorite artist, to conform to that palette. I think the large majority of y'all are guilty of that. You're guilty of expecting artists to give you the kind of albums that are going to slide easily into your tastes. And I think the one thing that I can say about Mass Country first is that it's probably AKA's most experimental project. Therefore, it's probably his most commercially foreign project. Therefore, that's why most of you motherfuckers are like, oh, it's a terrible project. It's because, one, you haven't given yourself the time to explore beyond music that's outside of your comfort zone. So how on earth are you going to be able to judge an artist that's doing the same thing, that's moving out of their comfort zone? It just doesn't compute. You're not going to appreciate this album because AKA was trying to break out of something that I'll go into later. So if you don't try to break yourself out of anything musically, of course this is going to be a terrible album to you. And you know what? You have the right to feel like that, but you don't have the right to take those little opinions and try to enforce them as ideals, because that's the difference between an opinion and a critique. A critique attempts to be something a little bit more. With these reviews here on the Headspace, I'm not even trying to give my opinion. Half of the music I listen to, I don't even like personally, but I give it the time. I give myself the time to explore the avenues, the corners, the pockets of where rap music is at, because other than that, I wouldn't even have the ability to preview these projects in the first place. If I don't understand the historical footprint of these artists and what they do, there's no way I'm going to be able to stand in front of you or anybody else and give a really integral representation of the art. And I think, just to kind of plug ourselves for a moment and blow our own horn, that's what sets the Headspace apart. You know, we really strive to understand even that which we are not immediately fond of, because it's significant in some way or the other. So our cultural insight looks into the trap phenomenon and whether or not it's actually hip-hop. Our questions into different dynamics are from a place where we're trying to critique it from having had done the homework. So my point is, firstly, do your homework. Know where something is coming from in order to appreciate it. And then number two, know what it's trying to do. Because if you don't know what AKA was trying to do with this project, then you're not going to be able to listen to it in the way that he might have intended that you listen to. So those are my principles. And then finally, with those two principles, you're able to then filter in the classic 5 principles that I'm not going to say it. You know, Takeza, put them on the screen every time, flash them, because by now they should know. If you're a Headspacer, you know what they are. And I think what those are is that they're ways to assess the kind of broad range of skills that an artist displays with each project. Because sometimes artists stay in the same place and they become complacent, so their technicality might have been great back then and it's just still the same in a market where many people are getting better. So that's another thing as well. Is an artist despondent? Are they getting better or are they getting worse? So folks, these are really the breeding ground fundamentals for doing real critical theory. If you don't have that kind of approach, What you're doing is not a review. Yes, I'm talking to you, Slick Talk. What you're doing is a self-indulgent act of disrespect to people who actually put in the effort and skill to give art. And if you're not an artist and you don't know what it takes to do that, shut the fuck up. Now let's start with the actual review. Mass Country. Mass Country comes literally at the tail end of a prestigious and phenomenal career. And I think that's put like super more pressure on it. But to kind of be brief with the kind of landslide anticipation that is on this project, you have Levels, an album which literally sculpted the nostalgia effect of South African rap and music in general, if you consider piano, and sent younger artists into a direction where they saw that the gold mine for relevance is mining culture, mining the past. AKA was literally the designer, the head designer of this movement, which had an approach in understanding South African culture and thereby taking valuable aspects of the slang, valuable aspects of the key phrases, and fundamentally valuable aspects of the music. The one consistent thread through all of AKA's projects, Levels, Touch My Blood, Bova Mania, and even the little side stuff that he did with Anati and Costa, is the fact that they're all bridled in this unapologetic sense of South Africanness. Forbes loved his dance music. He's been open about this, and he's always tried to tap into the dance culture and translate that into rap club culture. And it's a thing that he's always been able to do with a level of sophistication because he added a dynamic that most really don't add. And what is that? The art of musical arrangement. So let's talk about that. The arrangement approach of Kiernan Forbes was something that he painstakingly did to give people an experience which didn't just sound like his own personal reiteration of the past, but a new thing altogether. He does this utilizing a band in order to give those kind of subtle yet succinct flavors that pop out of songs. He does this in ways where he works with heavy teams that are able to make sure and nitpick on every aspect of a song. So, long story cut short, the history of Kiernan Forbes' music is marked with an attention to detail that is present in this project. Now, let's go into Mass Country as a theme. He openly spoke about how this was originally supposed to be a quote-unquote country album. What does that even mean? What does country mean? Now, country, for the most part, is rural music. It's music that catches the dispatches of indigenous people who haven't yet been thoroughly industrialized. It's the simple folk tales of a yesteryear and a simpler time. He did this in a time in his life that was riddled with a lot of pain and anxiety, and in order for him to kind of resonate into a gentler place, he envisioned the simpler South Africa, the Karoo, the farms, the gentle kind of breeze of Ilali, basically. And country to us would be something like Maskandi, hence Mass Country. There's a pun in there. And as a result, he devised this whole scheme of tapping into what a neo-country would sound like in the South African context. And obviously, being an artist who comes from the backdrop of rap, he was going to infuse rap in that. He wasn't going to grab a guitar and start doing something completely foreign to him. So you start to see that as much as he spoke about how it evolved into something more, the integral parts of what this was about are evident in songs like Last Time, which is literally a guitar riff that is laden with personal anecdotes of how the artifacts of South African culture fixture into AKA's journey as an artist. I mean, come on, he talks about Transnet, he references Shabalala's great goal in the World Cup, and it has always been AKA's super prime skill of highlighting the greatness of us as South Africans into the greatness of his own career, and as a result uniting both his own personal journey in order for him to kind of become a vicarious channel for us to feel great. And I think this album still does the same thing. I argue this album does it better than any of them, because I think the one thing that's different from Levels, which might be more musically attractive because it's more emblazoned in becoming pop, Touch My Blood, which was pretty much a deviation into a more pop culture centric sound, which, because if we're talking about Levels, that's really club pop rap. And if we're talking about Touch My Blood, now we're stepping into the Kaifa song era. Now we're stepping into AKA borrowing from other aspects of music which are far detached from rap as a whole. And if we're stepping into Bovamania, he takes a detour to ask, how deep does the trap movement have to go in order for it to become something uniquely South African? And I think there, because he wasn't a big fan of trap per se, and I know many who haven't listened to him really in depth would pass him off as yet another one of those who took trap. But no. You can't really say what Forbes was doing was trap. And as a result, he knew he was terrible at just making basic trap. And I think Bovamania is an example of that. It's an example of how him trying to make trap really didn't translate well, because it's a sound that didn't resonate from the depths of who he was to begin with. So what he did, what he really leaves with Mass Country, is something close to who he is. All of these songs are literally from an intimate place, and the one thing that I feel like is exhilarating about this album is, for the first time ever, he chooses to have more clarity and less auto-tune on verses. There's literally hardly any auto-tune, if any, in the raps themselves. Of course, he utilizes them in hooks, he utilizes them to highlight certain moments and ad-libs in verses in and of themselves, but the way he moves through every message in this song feels like a personal memoir from him himself. And he tends to have this kind of drawl that feels like a smoke-infused, drugged-out atmosphere where his voice is almost falling apart into just pure vibes. But I think in Mass Country, this is the clearest he's ever sounded in a while. He sounded so mentally clear, he sounded so conceptually clear. So I love the fact that on a vocal level, this is literally the most concerted and the most direct that I've ever heard him since Levels, The Hunger, The Need to Be Heard. Because after a while, he was just doing it because he knew he could. But here, he's actually getting to a place of asking himself, what are the most important things that he needed to say? In songs like Mbuzi, he's able to still floss, yet talk about his personal journey. In Lemons, he's able to make you dance, yet still show you the simple things that can be appreciated in order to be happy. With Prada, with Kulichana, he's able to do the same thing and talk about this global atmosphere of aspiring for the world, yet still take it back to a place that says, my luxury is simplicity. Simplicity is love. Love is appreciating what you have. You can only appreciate what you have when you work and you hone your skill. What is your skill? Identify it. And this is what AKA has been trying to say. And I think this is the project that he said it with the clearest. So if you ask me, I think this is AKA's most personal project. And as a result, because of that, maybe y'all ain't used to him being that personal. Maybe a lot of you just wanted typical AKA who was gonna tell you that everything is okay just because you need to be in a good vibe about it. But this is an AKA who's more honest. This is an AKA who's contemplating things and looking up at the sky and talking about God in a way where he was openly pursuing a path via Christianity. I mean, roping in Booga Love is a big deal. But he talks about it in ways that are intimate. This is not a gimmick. This really feels like a Kanye-esque journey into faith. It really feels like AKA probably would have given us a gospel album after this. He probably would have worked with Joya Celebration and Benjamin Dube, knowing him. He probably would have remixed. He would have talked about Wendy Mseleko and Family Factory. He probably would have sampled Lundi or Rebecca Malope. I think this is where he was going. Because this is a man who was conflicted and he was at the cusp of his life. And he had the bravery to say that if the people have been with me at my best, then they'll be with me at my worst. Because honestly, emotionally, this is the most emo album he's ever released. He's not talking about a lot of happy things on this. Yes, he's talking about the happiness of where he's reached in life. You know, Dangerous is an example of him appreciating the love he's finally found. Shout out to Nadia Nagai for a pretty decent verse. For a change. I guess love makes us better in so many ways. Shout out to people like MT who constantly, and I mean, come on, AK is one of the few artists who's unapologetically digging MT from whatever grave he's in right now personally, because he believes in talent. And I think the one thing that I'm gonna miss personally about the Super Mega is his ability to bring the best out of everybody, because I think every artist in here competes with him on a level that is superb. Kulichana pulls out something that is adjacent to him in a way that dances together. We all know the famous Nasty C verse where I'm pretty sure AKA sat him down and said, listen, you need to be South African for a change. And oh my god, Nasty C is referencing things like Morvite on a song. You don't get any South African than that. We're talking about Java, who all the time steals verses. And of course, unfamiliar artists from the diaspora who Forbes works with in ways that bring us front and center to something that is pan-African. That's why I say he's Africa's greatest rapper, not South Africa's greatest rapper. This is a man who held the South African flag, but had his heart in the continent. And I think if this album is an artifact for anything, it is the most vulnerable moment of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, rapper we've ever had. And as emotional albums tend to be, they're not going to translate well into the club. So I think obviously you have bangers like Mbuzi, which utilizes the Sister Bettina, and of course shout out to Benny McCarthy, and you have Lemons and Prada, and that's the genius of it, is that even in his personal moments, you can't say that AKA can't give us something to dance to. So personally, I think this one is a clear-cut 9 out of 10. It's almost but not fully a classic, and I think the only thing that was really missing from this was a little bit more of that initial concept of going into the countryside. I think he might have kind of ran too fast in abandoning that concept altogether, because tracks like Last Time and Army, the last bonus track, feel like an ode to that. I mean, that sample in Army, which kind of gives us this idea of being enlisted in a war on behalf of capitalism, and here Forbes goes about rapping about the history of South Africa. He talks about Terre Blanche, and I guess this is the thing that motherfuckers, I'm not even gonna talk about this on this episode because I've said it a lot, the importance of AKA's raps in and of themselves. But the one thing I want to say about this project is that it might not be to your liking, but that's probably because you're stuck in a place where you can't fully appreciate it. Because if you know the man and where he's ultimately gotten to and his legacy, I think I'm gonna rate AKA's projects now, and I think where this fits in. So let's check that out. Okay, so here we go. This is VJ's personal AKA projects list. Now, at number 7, 24/7 366. It's basically nascent AKA. It's the labor pains of the eventual birth that we see in Levels. So it's basically Levels light. What's this? Alter ego light. And he's going into the main structures of what would make him as an artist. Number 6, it's You're Welcome with Costa Teach, mainly because the chemistry doesn't really land so easily, and I think Forbes basically did what he does and runs a formulaic approach which doesn't create any standout tracks. I mean, Super Soft could have been one of those, but again, it doesn't become anything new. Alter Ego in and of itself, because of the impact that it laid, gotta be on my number 5, because it basically became the journey of the AKA we know and love. He found this formula. It's Ivy League season. It's a stage where he's fraternizing with Pro and Cooley. Number 4, Touch My Blood. He's basically entering the weddings and the ceremonies. He's showing us that he's transcending, so to speak, rap. Number 3, Mass Country. I really think for me, this is up there, top 3. Because again, most personal, most vulnerable, most experimental to date. And I think with that in the bag as an artist who's achieved so much, it's still impressive that he can still kick song arrangements that can resonate this deeply as he did. Number 2, don't forget to pray with Anati. Now that's a chemistry which, pun intended, felt like it was made in heaven. They talk about God in a way that kind of flares it around as a metaphor for the ultimate greatness in both of their lives and giving grace and gratitude for the things that they've done in ease that is impeccable, with both production geniuses coming at the helm to basically give us one of South Africa's great testaments of glory and trap. Finally, the classics gotta be levels. So for me, ultimately, Mass Country is AK's greatest third project, simply because it's his most personal. And if you didn't know things about him before, now you do and know more. It's literally where he takes the time to become more than just a pop star and become something deeply intimate to us. Because we know throughout AKA's career, he characteristically chose not to be so personal because he built this persona of being the bad guy. And finally, that all falls away because life did what life did. And I think even before his death, he was in a place of contemplating the fact that he had not been as real with himself as he should have, and subsequently, he had not been as real with us as he should have. So the last thing that we should leave appreciating mass culture for, Mass Country, for, if anything, is this was AKA's attempt at being his most realness. So shout out to realness, because I guess it's a synonym for authenticity, something he has always been. Like I said, for me, a clear 9 out of 10, his third greatest project. Get with me in the comment section if you feel like tatty nonsense and I'm just, gargling on a posthumous dick. But to be honest, again, I started into what critique is about and how I approach these. And I think if we were to look at the journey of an artist, this is a consummate project. And anybody who says otherwise is caught in the limbo of trend and popularity. Shout out to the Megacy. I'm not one of y'all, but I understand why that would even exist. My name is VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. What I definitely am is for the headspace. Shout out.
The Mass Country is the most South A of South A albums you'll ever hear. It's literally called Mass Country. It's for the masses of the country. What? So there was only one audience I'm pandering to with this album. That is South A, South A, South A.
Masses.
And listen, bro, we running music right now.
Yeah, 100%.
If you popping in South A, you popping.
Popping, 100%.